James, you remember how to set up the tent, right? I called out as I hauled the bulky camping gear from my trunk. He glanced over, pushing his glasses up his freckled nose. Yeah, I think so. It's been a while, though. I couldn't help but notice the way his t-shirt stretched across his broad shoulders as he dug through the supplies. An average guy, sure, but something about James drove me wild lately. Need any help over there? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. James looked up with an awkward smile. Maybe you can spot me in case I miss any steps. You got it, buddy. I settled onto the grass, watching James's capable hands begin assembling the tent frame. This camping trip might be interesting after all. James got the tent upright finally, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow. Well, I'm already sweating like a pig out here. I couldn't help giving an appreciative glance as he peeled off his t-shirt, revealing a lightly haired, toned torso. For a shy, late bloomer, James clearly took care of himself. Need some help? I offered, standing up and moving closer. Our eyes met, and I could have sworn I saw James's gaze flick down briefly before averting his eyes. He cleared his throat. Yeah, sure, if you don't mind. As I bent down next to him, our arms brushed together, sending an electric jolt through me. James wasn't exactly experienced in the romance department, being fresh out of the closet at 25. A delightful thought crossed my mind. I could be the one to show him the ropes, so to speak. Whereas my sexual resume was, well, extensive. A bit of a slut, if I'm being honest with myself. But something about James's innocence was undeniably hot. Like this, I asked, guiding his hands on the tent pole. James swallowed hard. Yeah, just like that. With the tent finally pitched, we took a break, cracking open a couple of cold beers. Sweat trickled down the back of my neck as the afternoon sun beat down. Man, it's going to be a scorcher tonight, James said, fanning himself. Hopefully it cools off a bit. I couldn't help but imagine the two of us alone in this sweltering heat. Clothes sticking to slick skin, inhibitions lowered. My mind wandered to how James might look underneath those cargo shorts. He must have noticed me staring because he shifted uncomfortably. What? Do I have something on my face? Snapping back to reality, I quickly recovered with a grin. Nah, man, you're good. I'm just ready to jump in that lake over there and cool off. Race ya! I took off at a sprint towards the water's edge, peeling off my shirt as I went. A few seconds later, I heard James crashing through the bushes behind me in hot pursuit. This camping trip and its possibilities were just getting started. When we finally made it to the shoreline, I cannonballed right in, the shockingly cold water relief against my overheated skin. James wasn't far behind, letting out a whoop as he surfaced next to me. Bet you can't do a better belly flop than me. He challenged with a provocative gleam in his eyes. Game on. After thoroughly exhausting ourselves with an epic belly flop contest, James and I hauled ourselves out of the lake, breathing heavily. I think you won that one, I panted, sneaking an admiring glance at James's dripping wet torso. Beads of water trailed tantalizingly down his toned stomach, and I had to stifle a groan. James must have noticed because he grabbed a towel, suddenly bashful as he dried off. Yeah, well, there's always next time to redeem yourself. As we headed back to the campsite, my mind wandered back to that conversation with our mutual friend, Dan, before the trip. So, what did Dan mean when he told me to enjoy myself without awkwardness this weekend? James's eyes went wide and he nearly tripped over a tree root. He said, what? Just that. I shrugged nonchalantly, like almost giving me permission to make a move or something, but then he also warned about making things awkward between us. James was silent for a long moment. The air thickened with tension until finally he spoke up. Well, Dan knows I'm pretty inexperienced in the dating world, being a late bloomer and all. He looked at me with those earnest eyes that drove me crazy. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't interested. If you were. My breath caught in my throat as James's meaning sank in. This was my chance, but how to proceed without spooking him. The crackle of the campfire filled the heavy silence between us as I tried to formulate a response. My heart was pounding. James was interested in me. I cleared my throat, keeping my tone light. Well, isn't this an interesting development? Reaching over, I gave his knee a friendly pat that lingered perhaps a bit too long. James tensed but didn't pull away. Look, man, I think you're a great guy, I began cautiously. And I'll be honest, I've definitely noticed how Ahem, good-looking you are lately. James's cheeks flushed pink in the firelight, and he ducked his head shyly. You don't have to say that. I know I'm nothing special. Hey, I hooked a finger under his chin to meet his gaze. I'm just telling it like it is. You're a stud, dude. Most of our faces were just inches apart now. I could taste the nervous breaths he exhaled, smell his warm, musky scent. Then James did something that surprised us both. He surged forward to capture my lips in a searing kiss. Any restraint I had left melted away as I eagerly returned the kiss, pulling him against me. When we finally broke apart, both of us were panting heavily. James looked equally stunned and delighted. Wow, it was all he could manage. I just grinned. Don't sell yourself short, handsome. This is going to be one hell of a camping trip. Our passionate kiss had kicked open the door to new possibilities. As we sat by the crackling fire, our hands began to wander exploratorily over each other's bodies. I murmured, planting heated kisses along James's jawline. We were supposed to get a little high on this trip. He let out a shaky laugh as my lips trailed down his neck. Why ye? Yeah? Well, we're already higher than a kite right now, if you ask me. Touche, I chuckled, nipping at the sensitive skin just below his ear. But just think how much fun we could have. Reaching into my bag, I retrieved the carefully rolled joint I had stashed, giving James a mischievous look. He worried his lip between his teeth, considering it. Those delicious lips that I had finally gotten to taste. What the hell, James finally said with a bark of laughter. When in Rome, right? I lit up and took a long drag, holding the smoke in my lungs before exhaling slowly. That's my man, I praised him huskily. Here, get a taste of this. Passing the joint to James, I guided his fingers to hold it properly before he inhaled. He coughed harshly a few times, but gave me a lopsided grin once the harsh sensation passed. Wow, that's really smooth, he managed in a gravelly tone. Just wait till you feel the full effects, handsome. I waggled my eyebrows suggestively. We're just getting warmed up. The aromatic smoke clouded around us as James and I passed the joint back and forth, our bodies growing looser and more attuned to every tantalizing touch and brush of skin on skin. Feels like the fire's getting hotter, James mumbled at one point, shrugging off his shirt to expose his tanned, toned torso to the cool night air. My gaze drank in the glorious sight as I took another hit. You've got that right, stud, I rasped out, shamelessly ogling his form, whether bolstered by the weed or the heated looks I kept giving him. James's shyness seemed to be melting away by the second. Moving with surprising confidence, he swung one muscular leg over my lap to straddle me. That's like what you see. His voice was low and husky as those big eyes stared into mine. I barked out a laugh, looping my arms around his lower back to pull him flush against me. What do you think, handsome? I'm having a very hard time keeping my hands off you tonight. Punctuating my statement, I ground my rapidly stiffening length against James's backside, eliciting a delicious gasp from those perfect lips. Good, he growled in my ear before nipping at the lobe sharply. Then don't. We came together in a frantic, sloppy clash of lips and questing hands. So much for taking things slowly, not that I was complaining in the slightest. Some distant part of my brain dimly registered, I should be careful not to push this innocent lamb too far too fast. But with the liquid heat coursing through my veins, all rationality was quickly evaporating into a blur of lust. Our frenzied makeout session showed no signs of slowing as hands roamed over heated skin. James ground shamelessly against my aching hardness, seeming newly emboldened by his desires. Fuck, he panted raggedly against my lips. I've never liked this before. Just let me take the lead, handsome, I rumbled in his ear. I'll show you how it's done. With that, I deftly flipped us over so that James was on his back in the soft grass. He looked up at me with a mix of trepidation and heady arousal as I quickly divested myself of my clothes. Soon we were both nude under the starry night sky, the glow of the dying campfire casting a sensual flicker across our entangled bodies. James squirmed restlessly beneath me until I captured his wandering lips in another blazing kiss. Relax, I murmured against the corner of his mouth. Just feel. Purposefully, I ground my solid length alongside James's impressive erection, dragging a shuddering moan from him. His blunt fingernails raked deliciously down my back as I set a rolling rhythm, our arousals sliding slickly together. Oh God, James gasped out, throwing his head back to expose the strong column of his throat. Please, I need. The wanton neediness in his tone sparked a possessive flare within me. Capturing his mouth once more, I swallowed down his whimpers and cries as we rutted shamelessly against one another under the stars. Our frantic lovemaking reached a fevered pitch, sweat-slicked bodies undulating and straining fiercely against one another. Somewhere along the way, we had transitioned to that timeless dance as old as desire itself. James clung to me with a desperation that only stoked my own wild lust higher. His nails left stinging trails along my shoulders as I surged into his welcoming heat again and again. "Oh, fuck D, don't stop," he babbled mindlessly, legs locked tight around my driving hips. "Please, harder." Who was I to deny such an exquisite plea? Bracing myself, I rammed into him with fierce, almost punishing strokes. The melodic cries torn from James's throat with each punishing thrust was the sweetest melody. Our lovemaking quickly became unrestrained, primal, two creatures chasing that elusive bliss only achievable through the most intimate joining of bodies. All thoughts of going slowly or second-guessing fled in the face of such blazing desires. James was a remarkably fast learner, meeting me thrust for frantic thrust, nails scoring reddened lines across my back in a harsh grip. We moved as one, attuned to each ragged breath and guttural moan. I'm gonna, James choked out suddenly, throwing his head back hard enough that his spine arched bowstring out off the ground. That exquisite sign of his impending rapture proved to be my own undoing. Snarling out a feral sound, I relinquished every last shred of control as ecstasy lanced through me in searing waves. We shuddered and writhed through our shared release under the canopy of stars, equal parts satiated and ravenous. When the haze finally cleared, we lay tangled in a sweaty, panting heap, stunned by the passion that had consumed us both. Sated for the moment, I rolled onto my back next to James, our heated breaths puffing out in clouds under the cool night air. Neither of us spoke. The only sounds were the crackling of the dying campfire and the chorus of nature around us. Eventually, I turned my head to study his profile bathed in the golden firelight. A sheen of sweat caused his skin to glisten, and his lips were slightly parted as he recovered. An overwhelming tenderness swelled in my chest. "You okay over there, handsome?" I murmured, reaching over to stroke his damp hair back from his forehead. James's eyes fluttered open at my touch, liquid brown pools reflecting the flames. A small, wondering smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Yeah, he finally exhaled. "I'm great. Just processing, I guess." Shifting closer, I pressed a soft kiss to his shoulder. "No regrets, I hope?" A husky chuckle escaped him then. "Are you kidding me?" That was a word seemed to fail him as pink tinged those irresistible cheeks. "It's the fattest experience of your life so far," I supplied with a teasing grin. When he ducked his head shyly, I caught his chin to hold his gaze. "For me too, gorgeous, believe me." Something blazed in James's eyes at my sincere words. Then in one fluid motion, he rolled over to straddle my hip, pinning me to the ground with that delicious weight. "So, how about," he purred, rocking subtly against my rapidly reawakening desire, "we make some more unforgettable memories together tonight?" A low groan rumbled from my chest as my hands found purchase on his backside. "You've got one hell of a learning curve, handsome." James and I lay panting and sated once more after another impassioned round of lovemaking under the stars. This time, he rested his tousled head against my heaving chest as I idly trailed my fingers through his sweat-dampened hair. "Wow," he murmured into the stillness between us. "That was even better the second time." I gave a rusty chuckle, pressing a kiss to the top of his head. "And the third, fourth, fifth times will only get better, trust me." Drawing back slightly, those soulful brown eyes searched mine with an unreadable expression. "Is that a promise?" The vulnerability beneath the attempted lightness in his tone tugged at my heartstrings. I cupped the back of his neck, holding his gaze steadily. "James, whatever this is between us, it's not just some fling for me, okay?" I brushed a stray lock of hair from his forehead tenderly. "I'm not going anywhere if you don't want me to." He blinked owlishly for a few moments before a slow, brilliant smile lit up his features, eyes crinkling at the corners. "Good, because I kind of really like spending time with you like this." Relieved laughter bubbled up from within me as I hauled him back down to my chest once more, reveling in the comforting warmth and solid weight of him. In that moment, with the moon bathing us in its ethereal glow and the sounds of nature all around, it felt perfectly content and at peace. Whatever came next after this camping trip, at least I knew one thing. James and I were on the same page about keeping this blossoming connection alive. The first pale streaks of dawn were just beginning to filter through the trees when I slowly blinked awake, and for a disoriented moment, I wasn't sure where I was. Then the memories of the passionate night I had shared with James came rushing back in vivid detail. My arm was draped possessively over his warm, naked form where he lay cuddled against my side, his even breathing fanned across my chest. Still deep in a contented slumber, tenderness bloomed in my chest as I allowed my gaze to roam admiringly over his tousled bedhead and the light dusting of freckles across his strong shoulders. Careful not to disturb him, I brushed the pad of my thumb in a feather-like caress along the sharp line of his jaw. A barely perceptible smile tugged at the corner of his lips, but James didn't stir. In this perfect stillness of early morning, I found myself overwhelmed by a sense of peace and rightness that I couldn't quite put into words. Just 24 hours ago, I had been fretting over whether making a move on my longtime friend was a huge mistake. Now, having taken that leap and experienced the intense passion that had awoken between us, I knew there was no going back. Whatever this connection was that had caught fire, I was determined not to let it extinguish after one incredible night. Settling back against the flattened sleeping bag, I simply allowed myself to savor the furnace warmth of James's pliant body tucked against mine. Perhaps this camping trip wasn't just a fling after all. With a newfound sense of cautious hope blooming, I pressed my lips to his bedhead and closed my eyes to drift back into dreaming. The trip may have been over, but the memories lingered like a vivid dream I never wanted to wake from. James and I had fallen into an easy, comfortable rapport during those 2 days in nature, our banter and intimacy only deepening after that pivotal first night together. Still, the question burned in the back of my mind as we tossed our camping gear into my truck. What now? Was this just a fun little spontaneous fling for James, or did he want to pursue something more serious going forward? I stole a sidelong glance at him as he stretched his arms overhead, the motion causing his shirt to ride up and expose a tantalizing strip of toned abdomen. The newly familiar longing for his warm skin against mine tugged insistently. So I cleared my throat, busying my hands with securing the last bag. I had a really great time this weekend. James paused, hands on his hips as he gazed at me searchingly. A small smile played about his lips. Me too. Like shockingly great if I'm being honest. My heart ticked up at the husky undercurrent in his tone. Okay, this was it. Time to be bold. Squaring my shoulders, I met his gaze steadily. Enough that maybe you'd want to go out sometime. On an actual date, for an endless beat. Those warm brown eyes simply studied me silently. Just as my nerve began to waver, James closed the distance between us in 2 strides. Cupping my face in his calloused palms, he captured my lips in a searing kiss that obliterated any remaining shred of doubt. When he finally pulled back, I felt dazed and deliriously giddy all at once. I'll take that as a yes. I managed around a bemused grin. Definitely yes, dummy, James chuckled, bumping his forehead to mine affectionately. In case it wasn't already obvious, I'm totally into you. This isn't just a fling for me either. My heart felt fit to burst as our fingers laced together effortlessly. Whatever came next, I knew this connection was just the spark that would ignite a wildfire between us. In the weeks after our camping trip, James and I were inseparable. We fell into a rhythm of dating, going out for drinks and dinner, catching movies, grabbing coffee, and just enjoying each other's company. But the real fireworks always happened when we were alone behind closed doors. Our chemistry between the sheets was off the charts, passion flaring hotter and more consuming each time we came together. One lazy Sunday morning, I awoke with James's toned arms wrapped around me from behind, his warm breath fanning against the nape of my neck. As I savored the comforting weight and heat of his embrace, a realization dawned over me. This is waking up tangled with someone I cared for deeply, bodies sated and pliant from lovemaking, was everything I had been missing in my previous slutty flings and hookups. There was an intimacy here, a profound connection that went far beyond just the pleasurable physical. Secchi carefully, I turned in the circle of James's arms until we were facing each other. His eyes were still heavy-lidded with sleep and sin, but crinkled at the corners when I brushed back the tousled lock of hair from his forehead. Morning, handsome, I murmured, voice rough from sleep and the lingering cries torn from me the night before. James hummed contentedly, pulling me flush against his solid warmth as he nuzzled against the sensitive spot below my ear. "Don't want to get up yet," he rumbled petulantly. "Stay in bed with me." A low chuckle reverberated from my chest as I hooked one calf around his hip, relishing the skin-on-skin contact. "You don't have to twist my arm. Gorgeous. I'm not going anywhere." James pulled back just far enough to meet my gaze, those liquid brown eyes soft with emotion. "Promise?" he asked, vulnerability peeking through his brave front. Ducking my head, I captured those tempting lips in a slow, lingering kiss full of reassurance and deepening affection. "Yeah, James, I promise." In that moment, I realized there was no other place I wanted to be than right here with this incredible man beside me. My past cravings for casual flings and emotionless pleasure paled in comparison to what I had found with James. We might have started off as friends going into that fateful camping trip, but fate had guided us on to a path towards something richer and more profound. As our bodies came together in a familiar dance, I couldn't wait to see where this newfound connection would lead us next. Several blissful months had passed since that life-altering camping trip, and James had seamlessly integrated himself into every facet of my world. We were virtually inseparable, whether grabbing drinks with friends, going on weekend road trips, or simply spending lazy days tangled up in each other and my rumpled sheets. In the quiet moments, I would sometimes catch myself watching him with an overwhelming tenderness, the way his thick lashes fanned across his cheeks when he was deep in concentration, or how his generous mouth would quirk into that lopsided grin that never failed to make my heart stutter. This man who had started off as just a longtime friend had awakened depth, the feelings within me that I didn't even know existed. I craved his warmth, his laughter, his electrifying touch with an intensity that constantly amazed me. One night, as we lay entangled and sated after a particularly passionate lovemaking session, it suddenly hit me like a freight train. In the flickering glow of the candles I'd lit earlier, I studied the relaxed lines of James's face, taking in every nuance as if imprinting the image to memory. "Marry me." The words slipped out in a hushed rumble before I'd even fully processed the thought. James's eyes fluttered open at the sound, finding mine instantly with a look of surprise that quickly melted into something softer yet intense. "Why, really?" His voice was little more than a hoarse rasp, heavy with emotion. Rather than answer with words, I simply reached up to trace the line of his razor-sharp cheekbone as I held that soulful gaze. A million inarticulate feelings seemed to pass between us in those charged moments. Then James was moving, shifting until he was braced above me on one-toned forearm. The sheets pooled enticingly around his narrow hips as he studied me with adamant eyes. "Yes," he stated simply, yet full of conviction. A brilliant smile spread across his features. "Abso-fucking-lutely yes." My heart felt fit to burst as I hauled him back down, meeting his kiss with everything I had. This was it. This crazy, improbable soul connection was the start of our forever. As our bodies came together with renewed passion, I couldn't help but marvel at how this all began. If I hadn't taken that risk and made a move during that fateful camping trip, who knows if I'd ever experienced this profoundly beautiful love. Looks like getting outside my comfort zone and embracing the unknown possibilities had awoken me to the greatest adventure of all.